for someone like yourself who's been a songwriter, been a worship leader for so many years, what is the one question that you so often get about those parts of life?
That's a great question. I mean, a lot of people first off ask, what is worship? How do you define it? And, I always talk about worship is revelation and response. It's really, we're seeing something of God and then we're choosing how are we going to respond to that. And so you can do that with songs, you can do it with the whole of your life, but that's essentially what worship is. It's seeing and singing, it's revelation and response.
When you're taking your songs on the road, when you're leading other people in worship, have you ever had a moment where you're just exhausted and you've ever wanted to just put down the guitar, stop songwriting for a little while and just make it a bit more of a personal experience only? Or have you always had the energy for the outward facing side of what you do?
There's always a great dynamic in a room full of music and voices, because that's just part of God's blessing and presence. He's given us this gift of music. But when it comes to using music to worship God, then this amazing dynamic, I like to call it the people of God in the presence of God, pouring out the praise of God, And so, I love singing on my own and all that, but I love getting in with the congregation, and just there's a dynamic, isn't there? And I love that. And the thing I love most is trying to write songs for those moments. Like you basically know, okay, a song is an enjoyable thing, but actually can be such a powerful thing. You could tell someone something about God today that could change their lives. So I've always loved the pursuit of that, and I love it.
It's good to hear, because there is something so energizing about gathering with other people, especially what's going to be happening at Worth, is that it's fellow songwriters, it's fellow worship leaders, maybe even aspiring musicians as well. What is it that you're wanting them to experience, and perhaps all of you collectively to experience in the room across the day?
The approach we've taken with these Worth days, by the way, we called it Worth because WOR for worship and the TH for theology. So thought these are worship and theology days. This would be a great plan, call it Worth. The idea is we're going to drink from the fire hose together. We're going to have a lot of content, a lot of sessions, and just ways of you can't teach everything in a day, right? You can't go home, right? We had a day together. I know the entire Bible now. But you can go home with a different mindset of okay, I'm going to take the revelation of God in my songs and in my services even more seriously than ever before. I think it's like the sacred responsibility. If you're writing songs, if you're choosing songs, you're getting up the front and telling people this is what God looks like. So you better make sure they're kind of accurate, right? And also you want to plumb the depths of who he is as much as you can. So that's what this day's about. It's about saying you can have a day where you can learn about music, production, creativity, all that stuff. And those days are wonderful, but this isn't what Worth is. Worth is about getting to grips with theology in our worship. Not in a boring kind of cerebral way, but in a way of this is the word of God that's alive and true. And if we get this into our songs, we can convey God in a really beautiful, powerful way. And also we can see lives change. So it's really worth doing it because it's honoring to him and it's helpful for us. And I have a passion for it because I feel like we need to celebrate our distinctives and one of our distinctives is to sing truth. Right? If you can sing some powerful truth about God and put them in a song that's a great song, you've got a chance of really reaching someone's heart and soul in a beautiful way.
Was there something that made you feel like something like this day was needed to remind people of the theology in music, remind, worship leaders of kind of their responsibility? Did something make you think we need to see that more so in those that are leading and writing right now?
Yeah, I think what it was just looking around and realizing there's a lot of resource for people who, about production or creativity or, crafting a song. And that's great because we've got an abundance of that kind of resource. But what I'm interested in is the average person who's a worship leader, how can they convey God in an even more powerful, deep way in their songs and services? And are there some ways? And the essential thing was, I realized, why we're not getting any better at this is because we don't ever measure. Like most things in life, you need to measure. Like you can go for a blood test, right? And they'll tell you what's good about your blood and if there's anything bad about it, if it's lacking anything, right? And I thought, man, we don't really measure. And so one thing Worth is about is let's just take a look, what we've sung or what we've said about God in our service in the last 6 months. I wonder if we've covered some of the main and plain themes of the story of God or aspects of the nature and character of God that should always be in the mix. Have we told people he's Trinitarian? and all those kind of things that, like, if you don't measure, you don't get to progress, out of them. You have to check where you're at before you can decide how to go forward.
And maybe we assume a level of theological awareness or knowledge in our congregations, particularly if you're somebody who's been in church any length of time. If you were raised in this, there might be a lot of assumption that everybody's on the same page about some of those basics of the Christian faith.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in this day and age, for sure, that's a factor. And songs are one of the most beautiful way of putting the story of God before people. And I've loved writing songs for decades now, and I'm not growing tired of it. And I know the reason. The reason's because the subject material is so good. The source material is just so good. Like, you're not going to get bored of it or tired of it. And it's one thing I've loved through these Worth days is meeting other songwriters, worship leaders, younger songwriters, worship leaders, who are just so keen to do a good job in painting a big picture of God in their songs and services. And I love that. And but all to say, these days are definitely designed for worship leaders, songwriters, worship teams, pastors, that sort of person. But these are also for anyone who's got a heart for deep worship. You're so welcome to come and join in. We'd love to have you there. You don't have to be like a fully accredited full-time songwriter or something. If you are, amazing, but just come along if you've got a heart for the deep things of God and the truth of Scripture and what it means to approach Him when we worship.
That enthusiasm that you talk about in some of the newer leaders coming through, how do you make sure that doesn't wear off, particularly in a culture where we love what's cool right now, what everybody's giving attention to right now, and then maybe that switches to something else? How do you make sure the enthusiasm sticks through that?
So much of stuff is about community, right? So I find that that's how we learn, that's how we grow, and sometimes I'll have a younger worship leader in the mix, and they'll be bringing something I don't have, but I have something that that they don't have as well. And so it might be that they're bringing that effervescence, that kind of spark of energy to the songwriting room or to the worship leading stage or wherever it is. And I think, like, man, it's hard for me to match that energy. But actually, I have something they don't have. And so some of that takes care of itself in community. But I think if we're singing in a songwriting room or we're preparing a worship service, you're always in this weird scenario of, like, we're just scratching the surface. Like, we could do our best work today and we wouldn't really get anywhere near conveying who it is we're coming before. Just the glory, grace, the majesty and mercy, the power and the peace of who He is. This is, in one way, that's quite a daunting thing, but in another way, that's a really fantastic thing, because it's like, man, this is what an amazing pursuit. I could do this for the rest of my life. Some of my heroes did. Charles Wesley, the hymn writer, wrote about 7,000 hymns. Most days managed a couple of journal entries, a couple of poems, and maybe wrote a sermon too. So he was really pouring it out. But the reason was because he plugged into the source. He was 81 years old on his deathbed, and he's still writing hymns. And this is amazing thing of this heartbeat in this guy his body is failing him, but his spirit is alive and well, and he can still sing to God because he's seen Him. And that's what I want to happen on these Worth days. I want us to realize, like, there's a direct correlation between seeing God and singing to Him. There's a direct correlation between, you can hype people up and G people up with music, but that's going to be shallow and temporary and not worth a whole lot. The other approach you could take is put God on display. Like, show people the mysteries and the magnificence and the majesty of who He is, and then let them make their own minds up and see what happens when they're presented with a God like that. And normally that turns into people responding in very wholehearted ways. That's what these days are about, this Worth days is about. Hey, let's put some great ingredients in this meal. Like, let's put some real nutrients in this thing, and really think through what we're doing here.
I love it. And I'm not going to be the first person to say that the Worth days will be very worthwhile going along to that.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for telling us more about them. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, and people can find all the details at worthworship.com. We've got an amazing team, actually. Darlene Check's going to be there. City of Light, who are like these modern hymn writing heroes, new kind of expression of hymns. Ben Fielding, honestly, I'm not exaggerating to say he's one of the most astounding songwriters for the last 20 years in the worshiping church. We've got my friend Leonard Jarman there too. Got this theologian, Dr. Mike Bird. So we're going to have a really fantastic day. And then the evening section is just a free flowing worship time with all of us leading together. So it's going to be beautiful.